Good morning. Good morning. Let me first apologize. I'm struggling with the cold here, so I'm a little hoarse. If you can't hear me in the back, just put your hand up and I'll speak a little louder. I'm smiling because I'm happy to see such a great turnout. I have some friends within the department I won't point to, but they said, we don't know if you're going to get a good turnout because people are afraid of the IG's office. And I don't know that I believe that, in particular with schools. I think the only time you should be afraid of us, rightfully, is when we're coming to put cuffs on you. Right? Other than that, we are some very nice folks. We really are. But I'm happy to be here this morning to talk to you about our mission, our work. My name is Aaron Jordan. I'm the Assistant Inspector General for Investigations. I am joined by two very, very nice people. Yessyka Santana, she's the Special Agent in charge of the Southeast region here, which covers Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, and Puerto Rico. And Robert Mancuso, who doesn't work directly for me, but does investigations for a group, our information technology audits and criminal computer crime investigations group, ITACI. And he's going to talk to you a little bit about things you may not deal with every day, but things you really need to be concerned about. And that's computer intrusion. You are prime targets. And so we're happy to be here to talk to you about our mission. We have some trinkets. Jesse has a couple things. I have some coins, and from what I understand, these are challenge coins, a big deal in the law enforcement community. And from what I understand, that if you go to Hudson Grill with this, it's happy hours free, right? Don't tell them I said that, but maybe try it. So we'll get started. I've been instructed that we have to stick within our time frame. If you have questions, and I'm hoping really we'll give you the 50-minute version, CSI version of what we do, and we will have plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions. I spend a lot of time talking to many of you directly. My number is posted. Please feel free to call me, and I do that. So if you have questions, we'll ask that you step to the mic so that everyone can hear it. But our hope is in the end we can have some dialogue and really hear from you on some of the things that you would like to have addressed. I'm going to give you just a quick 5-minute, as far as our agenda, background on the OIG organization and mission. Yessyka is going to come up and she's going to talk to you about investigation services, which is the group that I had, and we'll talk about our coordination with FSA, very important coordination, sources of allegations, in which you figure prominently into that. We have terrific working relationships with many of you in this room. That's a very important relationship because you are the first line, you are the eyes and ears of this office, and quite frankly, we couldn't do many of the things, we wouldn't be aware of many of the things that we investigate if it were not for you. So thank you. We'll talk about statutory and regulatory access to records, our standards of administrative capability, fraud indicators, very important. And we have, at the end, we'll provide you with some trifolds that we recently produced that will talk about the various schemes that really you will see, you may have indication of, some sense of, and we're asking as our partner to reach out to us. We're going to talk a little bit and give you some examples of Title IV for our schemes. Our criminal and civil investigations will give you some examples of the kinds of things we've done. Many of you are aware of the fraud rings that continue to occur. Rob will then talk to you about TCD's, Technical Crimes Division, their structure, their mission, and the types of investigations you would normally see from that group. And we'll close with ways that you can help us. And if I leave only one thing with you, is the importance of you and the work you do and the things you see, and in reaching out to our office. And we'll give you contact information. We have 16 offices around the country, which I'll talk a little bit about, okay? So a little bit about background. I often get this question about where does the IG fit within a department? And it's a constant, and I get the confusion. So IGs were created really to be independent. And so while we are part of the department, we're independent, which means our work is directed by the Inspector General, Kathleen Ty. Many of the audits and investigations, which I'll talk about, are components that we do are directed by our IG with some information and suggestions from the department, but we do not get our direction from the secretary or from anyone within the department. It's still a very important relationship because our mission, as stated there, is to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse. And as part of that, some of our responsibilities involve keeping the secretary and his staff informed, okay, as well as Congress and the President. The Inspector General Act, 1978, is really the genesis of IGs. Our sole mission and creation was to investigate and provide oversight through audits and investigations of departments, programs, and operations. That's very important because we don't make any operational decisions. Where you see regulations, where you see guidance from the department, we may provide information to inform that, but we don't make any of those decisions. And that's a very, very important distinction. And that's very important for our mission, that we remain independent so we can provide that objective oversight. The three components I'm going to talk about, audit services, investigation services, and our attache group, two of which are here, represented here today. Many of you deal with our audit, may or may not have dealt with audit services. Oftentimes people confuse auditors and investigators. And Yessyka is going to talk a little bit about the difference, not only between our audit group, but those folks within FSA. Investigation services, we have close to 80 agents around the country that primarily are responsible for conducting criminal and civil investigations. And that's truly what our focus is. The administrative things we try to work with the department on so they can take action where we can't. And I've often gotten many questions from you on things that are referred from your office where we may not take action. It's not because we don't want to. There are many times where we can't get cases accepted, and we'll talk a little bit about that. There are many times where, appropriately so, it belongs within the department to take an administrative action. So I've had some conversations where you vented that this is fraud, you know, IG, you need to do your job, and I wish it were that simple. And trust me, if we could lock up all the bad actors, we would, but that's unfortunately not the case. Just a map of where we are, large region to cover. The terrific thing about being dispersed throughout the country is that many of you have individual relationships with folks like Jesse and the other SACs that you interact with daily. Those are important relationships that we want to continue. I think many of our SACs and our ASACs, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, and our agents often come to your financial aid administrative conferences, your regional conferences, and in that forum you can have a little more dialogue about things that are specific to you. And before I forget, we will be around throughout the conference, so if you see me and you have a question that we don't get to here, please feel free to come up and talk to me, okay? Jesse's gonna take from here and talk about the partnership between OIG and FSA.
Thank you, Aaron. Well, very happy to be here with all of you. It's a pleasure. I want to tell you, I have a little more time now. So I have about 40 minutes. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. 23 years ago, I started out with the U.S. Department of Education with federal student aid as a program reviewer and worked out of the New York office conducting program reviews at schools in New York, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico. Worked many cases with Denise Morelli here with FSA back in the day. Went over to the OIG as a special agent back in 1996 out of the New York office. In 2004, I transferred to Pembroke Pines, Florida. We do have an office there. And became a supervisor with the Office of Inspector General in 2006. In 2010, made it here to Atlanta as the regional manager overseeing investigations in the 6 southeastern states, as Aaron mentioned. And we also do cover the Virgin Islands, to include Puerto Rico. I know there are schools here from some of our foreign medical schools that participate in our programs. From the Dominican Republic, I know UNIBE is here, and can you raise your hands wherever you are? We worked several cases back in the 90s with UNIBE where they helped us prosecute some students who were purporting to be medical students and never set foot to these schools. So UNIBE was very critical in assisting us in getting very successful prosecutions. So there is a lot of coordination with FSA and the OIG. We offer opinions when they're issuing regulations, assistance. We regularly exchange information with FSA to identify trends. And we do work with them in some of our investigative activities and issue management information reports. One of those reports that Aaron mentioned involves the distance education fraud rings. Even if you don't have online programs, this is a management information report that you do want to look at because it does point out a lot of the red flags that we're seeing with distance education fraud rings, which basically are loosely associated fraud rings that are committing fraud. Basically, if I were a fraud ring leader, I'd sign you up for distance education and you wouldn't set foot in the online education. Well, obviously you wouldn't set foot, but you wouldn't even sign on, for example. And that's what we're seeing. It's a grave problem. A lot of our cases involve distance education fraud rings. So we brought today a couple of copies, 20 copies if you're interested. If you haven't seen the management information report, I highly recommend that you grab a copy and take a look at it. Also, we have the Dear Colleague letter, Gen 1117, that talks about these fraud rings. This was issued in 2011. If you just Google Gen 1117, you'll go right to the Dear Colleague letter, and within the Dear Colleague letter, you'll be able to press on a link to get to the IPAR, to the Management Information Report, which is very good. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I highly recommend it. And our website, of course, will have more information too. So some of the differences between OIG investigation services and FSA and some of the compliance units. So our office, Investigation Services, we have law enforcement authority, statutory law enforcement authority. So we are special agents, about 80 nationwide. Our agents train at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Brunswick, Georgia. They're trained on how to execute arrest warrants, search warrants, and what we basically investigate fraud against our programs, civil, criminal cases. We're a small agency, but the work that we do is high quality and high output of work. If you compare us to the other Office of Inspectors General, we do put out a high output of results. One way to see some of our work, if you're looking for more information in some of the cases that I will mention, is the semi-annual report, which you could find on our website. And the semi-annual report is to Congress, because as Aaron said, we are independent from the Department of Education, but we have a dual reporting responsibility to the Secretary and to Congress. So semi-annually, we report to Congress, and in those reports, you'll be able to see some of our work. So like I said, we conduct criminal investigations and civil. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And FSA, the Enforcement Unit and Program Compliance, conduct program reviews, compliance reviews. They take administrative actions against schools, such as terminations, suspensions, and basically have administrative authority. And what we have is the law enforcement authority. And FSA is required, and the Department of Education, to send all allegations of fraud to the OIG. So as Aaron said earlier, thank you for the work that you do each day as basically our first responders. You are tasked with awarding or dispersing aid to our students. You are preventing fraud and abuse each day. So we do look to you and have worked with you on our cases. And without our partners, FSA, without school officials, our job would be difficult. So we are very grateful of the work with you all, and we do appreciate the work that you do each day. So you do play a critical role in helping the OIG. You serve as our eyes and ears, as Aaron mentioned. So our allegations of fraud come in, various ways, through the U.S. Attorney's Office, from you all, other law enforcement partners, U.S. Attorney's offices, and other OIGs. Disgruntled spouses, employees. So under the IG Act, we have authority to review records that relate to the Department of Education in order for us to perform audits, inspections, and investigations. The Family Educational Right and Privacy Act, FERPA, protects student information. And we wanted to bring to your attention, you may know this already because you've probably received a letter from the OIG requesting records, but we are exempt from that requirement. You don't have to inform the student, let them know that we're requesting the information, and you don't need a subpoena, or we don't need to execute a search warrant. Basically, under FERPA, the consent is not required to disclose student records to the OIG. Some of your obligations, which some of you may be familiar, what regulations these are. Does anybody know what regulations are mentioned here? What the title should be? It's 668. And Denise, you can't respond. Anybody? Okay. Administrative capability regulations. Some of you knew and you were afraid to answer. We're harmless. So the administrative capability regulations, if schools fail to show that they're administratively capable, it could be a cause for termination from the programs. But in those regulations, schools are asked to have adequate systems of control to identify and resolve discrepancies in awarding financial aid and administering the programs. So for example, fraud rings, a lot of times we see the ringleaders will use the same email address or the same IP address. So regulations call for schools to have adequate systems to prevent those types of fraud. Of course, individuals will target schools that don't have adequate systems, et cetera. So this is very important. Schools and their third-party servicers must refer to the OIG any credible information involving fraud that a school may have engaged or anyone else in fraud, misrepresentation, conversion. So it is a requirement for schools and third-party servicers to refer all matters of fraud to the OIG. In this way, if there's a program review and the reviewers come across something that appears to be fraud, you'll be able to show them, well, I sent this over to the hotline or to Jesse or to whomever, and you'll be able to show that you've done your due diligence. And if there's something that you don't know that you should refer to us, give us a call. We'll walk you through it. Gotten many calls from schools asking questions about, is this something that I should refer to the OIG? Is it something that I should send it to you or to the hotline? So we'll be more than happy to walk you through that. And we have cards here, and we'll also be here for a few minutes after the session if you have any questions or confessions to make. We're going to each have a corner, and we'll be taking confessions afterwards. And we will be back on Friday at 10:05 at A313 if you want to come back for some more. So we'll talk a little bit about the examples of the types of schemes that we see. Schemes involving students, well, single beneficiary cases. Those involve individuals committing fraud, submitting false statements to get financial aid. So it could be a false statement on a FAFSA. Cases, undocumented immigrants. My first case was an undocumented immigrant. She claimed to be born on a cruise, and she was born just when the cruise ship hit the US. She went to trial with Social Security Administration. She won. Social Security Administration put into evidence the wrong Social Security number. But then when we got involved, education, we made sure that all the documents that were presented at trial, we had someone come from the Virgin Islands to say that her birth certificate was fraudulent, et cetera. So that was my first case. So falsification of GEDs, high school diplomas, these are cases against individuals. Identity theft and distance education fraud schemes. Some examples of the cases that we work involving schools are failure to pay refunds. You may or may not know that we have been to the Supreme Court on a case involving refunds, and we do not have to show intent or knowledge of the refund, the intent or knowledge that the refund should have been paid. So as long as the refund was not paid, that's enough for us to prove our case that a refund has not been made, which is a violation of Title 20, 1097. So that's our education fraud violation. So that's been to the Supreme Court. We don't have to show knowledge or intent. Go students. Schools where have ghost students. We had a case out of New York that everything was fabricated. The accrediting visit, the program reviews. Toldos Yakov Yosef was the name of the school back in the 90s. And it was a 3-month trial. Did you work on that, Denise? No. Okay. And ghost students, everything was a sham. There was no school. Leasing of eligibility, we'll see schools put students through an ineligible location, which we know is wrong, or we'll see, yeah, that's one example. Default rate fraud, schools to avoid reporting, being kicked out of the programs for a high default rate will pay for the loans. Yeah, so we've seen that. We had a case like that out of New Jersey, a beauty school. Financial statement falsification. So many times we don't have to show that funds were dispersed. We had a case involving a school that submitted fraudulent financial statements. No funds were dispersed. They were just trying to get into our programs. And that was a successful case. It was financial statements to become certified in our programs, and they were fraudulent. Falsified last date of attendance, obstruction of a federal audit. We have an example to talk about, a case out of Florida that clearly illustrates this. Fraud, theft by school employees, FAFSA fraud, falsification of GEDs, high school diplomas. That same beauty school in New Jersey, they had fraudulent GEDs and the serial numbers. When you looked at the serial numbers, they were all the same. That's what you call a clue, right? Falsification of grades, and again, the failure to make refunds is a big one. And normally we don't go to trial on that one because if the refund wasn't made, pretty much that's all we need to show. And then loan theft, forgeries, embezzlement by school officials. So we'll get right into some of the examples. So we do work a lot of times, like I said, with you all. I mean, without you, some of these cases really wouldn't have the success that we have. So this one was a case out of New York that came in from a school official. And she was embezzling over $500,000. She was submitting fraudulent invoices for supplies that were never ordered. There were no supplies. And she basically embezzled the money, $500,000. So she was sentenced to 2 years in prison, and she was ordered to pay over $500,000 in restitution. It's not on there, but I verified it. She was. And she's the vice president of... This one came in from Rio Salado, a distance education fraud ring. Again, fraud ring, Cheryl Jean Jones, this is her home. They suspected that they would find drugs at the house, and they did when they did a search warrant here. And she was also prosecuted. She used the identities of 52 individuals to put in for loans for online distance education. And she was successfully prosecuted. And again, this was something that came in from a school. Sentenced to 2 years and ordered to pay $166,000 in restitution. Now I'd like to talk about Galliano, a great case out of Florida. And before I tell you a little bit about it, I want to show you this.
Right now, federal agents are raiding an Altamont Springs school. They're going through files and interviewing students at the Galliano Career Academy. Channel 9's Liz Arts is there live. And Liz, students told you this investigation is about financial aid fraud.
Yeah, that's right. And we have watched through these windows since 10 o'clock this morning. Agents have even dismantled several computers. We watched them do that. And from what we understand, CEO Anthony Galliano was questioned for most of the day right through those doors. Students gathered all day Wednesday outside Galliano Career Academy, not knowing their future.
No, are you serious? So what are we supposed to do?
Federal agents wouldn't talk, but students questioned by them told us they were quizzed on how much their tuition was, how much they received in student loans, and how much of that money came back to them.
They're not paying. They're keeping the money. They're embezzling.
Stephanie Can is like many of these students. She receives the Pell Grant. She says that after tuition is paid, she's supposed to get the remaining money to pay for books and living expenses, but agents think the school was pocketing that money.
That was the words. We're gonna keep the rest of the money.
The private school has roughly 150 students and 35 employees. Most degrees can be completed in 12 months. Students tell us they've forked over anywhere from $9,000 to $20,000. The school's website lists Anthony Galliano as the CEO, his son Michael as the president. Vicki Adams is the director of financial aid. Were you taking financial aid
Get
money?
that out of my face.
Amy Johnson has borrowed $13,000 to pay for her 11-month education that she thought would get her a good job as a medical assistant. Tearfully, she told us her sister warned her about the school.
She was afraid that they were preying on the uneducated and the poor. So we could get an education. I feel like that's what they did.
Now, we checked, and this school, which only has this one location, has been involved in several civil suits, but most of those were either settled or dropped. We've told that the school will be open tomorrow. Live in Seminole County.
Okay. So that's Mr. Michael Gagliano, one of our cases at Florida. Has anyone seen this or is familiar? No? Okay, some of you are. So Mr. Gagliano decided that he would have a diploma mill at his father-in-law's tile shop and put all his students that were attending as graduates of this diploma mill. So it was millions of dollars that was dispersed in Title IV funds for students that had no high school diploma, that basically got this diploma mill from, students were promised that it would be okay. And for a fee, they got these certificates from Mr. Gagliano's diploma mill. Mr. Gagliano also decided that he would set up surveillance cameras and install spyware in computers in preparation for a program review. So when we executed those search warrants, we did come across those cameras and a CD in his desk that was clearly labeled for us, program review. It was great. So he was prosecuted, and again, this was a case that we worked. There was a school official who was being pressured by Mr. Gagliano. She was wonderful. Without her, she was great. She offered great information. I believe she went to the sentencing. Many times we'll see that. But the school did close, and Mr. Gagliano did plead guilty to obstruction of an audit for recording the program reviewers. And what he did was he set up the spyware on the computers so he can track the program reviewers, what they were doing on his computers. And he only allowed one working computer with the spyware. He made the other ones, made it seem as if they didn't work. So, and one of the things he was doing too is he was fabricating charges on account cards to make it appear as if credit balances were not due. So, for example, if there was a credit balance due of $1,500 to the student, he would fabricate like a beauty kit. And the student never received a beauty kit, clearly, and we were able to show that from our evidence from the search warrant. So he was sentenced to 4 years, and he was ordered to pay restitution over $2 million. We've also recently gotten involved in cases against individuals who have used financial aid funds to try to get to Syria to join ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. So we recently went to trial, past summer, we had one of our agents testify during trial, and what they were doing was obtaining financial aid for that purpose, to try to go to Syria to join ISIL and commit murder. So we did go to trial, they were convicted, and hot off the press, they were sentenced this month. The sentencings range from 10 to 35 years. So the U.S. Department of Education was involved in this investigation against these individuals, working with the FBI-led Joint Terrorism Task Force. Some of our civil investigations involved EDMC. They were accused of violations of the Higher Education Act's incentive compensation ban, of deceptive and misleading recruitment practices. They were paying their admissions representatives bonuses for the students they enrolled, and as we know, can't do that. So we settled on this case last year, and it was a $95.5 million settlement. So again, the differences, criminal versus civil cases. Our criminal cases, the one up here is the criminal education fraud. We talked a little bit about it, and it's our Title 20 1097, our education fraud statute we use a lot of times. But there are other criminal statutes that we use in conducting our investigations. Wire fraud, mail fraud, several others. But our very own education fraud statute covers the failure to pay refunds, anyone who knowingly and willfully embezzles, misapplies, steals, and obtains by fraud. Persons convicted of a felony shall be fined and not more than $20,000 or imprisoned for not more than 5 years or both. And in our statute, we have attempt. So we don't have to show that the funds were received, just the mere attempt could also constitute a violation of this statute. In our civil cases, we use the Civil False Claims Act, and it basically involves false claims to the government. So we could show that there has been a false claim, there's a specific intent to defraud the government, not required, you could be held liable for civil penalties. Many times these cases are settled, like you saw in the EDMC matter. And now I present to you Rob from TCD, and we work very closely with TCD. They come out and help us a lot when we do our search warrants. So, thank you.
I get the great privilege of leading our technology crimes division. We're very unique within the entire IG community in that we have 3 very distinct disciplines within our unit. We have the traditional investigators, which we investigate cybercrime, cyber fraud, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We do the computer forensics. So in the video that you saw, I think the reporter mentioned about people taking apart the computers. That was my team. On the search warrants, we go there and we forensically image the computers that are being seized. So that's what we do, and we do the analysis afterwards. And we also have a data analytics group. 3 teams. The 3 teams are the electronic crimes team, the data analysis and referral team, and the our digital forensic laboratory. Again, the uniqueness is that my team isn't just all agents or all IT specialists. We have IT specialists, we have special agents, we have investigative analysts, and brand new to the unit is a financial analyst too. So when we go on these search warrants and we seized financial records, that person is the one who does the analysis, schedules the bank records, and kind of really finds out where the money's going. What is our investigative mission? We investigate cyber threats against the department's IT infrastructure, or also investigate criminal activity in cyberspace that threatens the department's administration of federal education assistance funds. Really, our mission or our jurisdiction is we can conduct investigations into any unauthorized access of information technology systems used in the administration, processing, disbursement, or management of federal funds originating from the department. So that's kind of how we get involved with the schools. You guys have systems that process and disperse federal funds, so that's how we get involved with those things. We also, another part of what we do is identify vulnerabilities within the systems that we, or either the cases that we're looking at. I'll show you an example where we found a vulnerability within the Campus View program that we worked with Oracle and worked with Campus View to get the vulnerability fixed and sent out. So here's the million-dollar question for this morning. Like, how does this relate to you all? Now, how many people do we have in the audience that work in a financial aid office? Okay, the large majority of you. How many of you come to work every day and think that you work in a target-rich environment? About half. So, I mean, that's what I really want to impress upon you today, is that you have to take these things seriously, the IT security. What you have is what commercial entities, insiders, hackers, terrorists, and foreign intelligence services want. Go on Google News and type in university or college and data breach. You'll see that more and more you all are being targeted, all right, because you have enormous amounts of personally identifiable information on your systems. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever heard, I'll try not to go too much into technobabble, the dark web or the dark net. It's kind of the underbelly of the internet. You can sell an ID, somebody's personally identifiable information, name, date of birth, social security number, for about $12 to $15. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, okay? But for some of you who are part of larger universities, take the amount of students that you have and times that by $12 to $15. And that could be in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars if they get access to your information. So commercial entities, you can think, if I have information on the students who have gotten loans from your school, that'd be of interest to predatory third-party people trying to consolidate loans, all right? People who are trying to sell information to credit card companies so they can send out credit card. College students, university students are a huge target for credit card, to get them to sign up for credit cards. Insiders, hackers. Hackers is kind of self-explanatory. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the example. But I do want to focus on the foreign intelligence services, because this is a real key to what we've been seeing recently. If you're interested in a government employee's information, you're with a foreign government, all right? You're interested in finding out somebody who may be in your country who you may think works for the United States government, okay? It's very hard to hack into a 3-letter agency, all right, or hack into the government. But a lot of those people have students in your schools. If they can get access to that information, they have access to that employee's information. So it's again, you all are a very target-rich environment. The information that you have is extremely valuable to a large group of individuals who do not plan on using it for good. The other thing that they're interested in is your hardware and bandwidth. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Kind of get through this quickly so we have time for questions. But the ID Theft Resource Center, it's a really interesting website. In 2016, when I was preparing for this presentation, and I believe it was end of September, early October, there had been 783 breaches of over 29 million records just this year. So you can see PII and the targeting of PII is a very, very real threat. So what do criminals do on your network? First, they scan for vulnerable systems. They look for where the easy entry points are. They take the low-hanging fruit if possible, a database that has a default password. They abuse trusted computing relationships. They may not be able to log into a Department of Education system from a foreign country, but if they can hack your systems, it looks like it's coming from you all and not from overseas. The other thing that I really want to talk about is the weak IT security posture. This allows the criminals into your system. So for all the people who raise their hand that say they're part of a financial aid office, you guys need to make friends with your IT security people. And you need to make sure that they understand this also. Because oftentimes they think, well, we're not a big school, or, you know, again, all it takes is look into the news to see how serious this threat is. And we've seen big universities targeted, and we've seen smaller schools also targeted. Shared passwords, we've seen this a lot. You should not be using shared passwords to access any sort of financial aid records. Oftentimes it's very easy when there's 3 or 4 of you in the office, you share that password so you can log into the system. That's really bad. And that also gives hackers, when you have that Excel spreadsheet with all your passwords on there, I mean, all of us have done it. When they have access to that, they have access to your systems. This is a case that we worked very closely with the University of Nebraska. We had a student there who decided that they were not happy with their grades. And so, being a computer science major, he decided that it would be smart to hack into the University of Nebraska system, get into the Campus View database, and change his grades. While he did that, he got access to about 650,000 students' personally identifiable information. We investigated this with the Federal Bureau, the FBI. We actually did the forensic analysis on this case. We found that several weeks before the actual hack happened, that he was doing reconnaissance on the systems. He was trying to find out where those weak points are, those things that we talked about before. Ultimately, the student was convicted of violating 18 U.S.C. 1030, which are computer crime statutes, and fined over $100,000, and actually was confined to prison for 1 year. I want to turn you all into cyber sleuths. It does not take a badge to identify or detect fraud. A lot of times it takes common sense. So I want you guys to think about when you see things that don't make sense, all right, that give you, that something is just uncomfortable, okay, report it. Don't hold it back, because a lot of times you find out, I really should have said something because I noticed something wasn't right. Individuals requesting access to systems that they don't normally require access to. So you have somebody in another department that says, hey, I need access to your financial aid databases. That should not happen. Using removable media in systems that data should not be removed. So you have somebody come into your financial aid office, and they're constantly, in the morning they're plugging in a USB, and when they leave they're unplugging the USB. And there's no reason to be transferring data on those systems. So those are things that should make you say, something's going on there. Accessing systems outside of normal work hours. That's something you can work with your IT security folks. Sometimes people do work weird hours and they like working at nights, and those are fine. But 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, access to the financial aid systems, that should raise a red flag, or at least initiate additional questions into why that's happening. Bragging about, and believe it or not, people, human nature, when we do something, especially something really stupid, we like to brag about it. I've got a teenage boy, and all he does is look at YouTube for people who are doing stupid things, and they brag about it. And so it's amazing how people do dumb things and they want the world to know about it. Oftentimes, people who do these things, they will brag about it. They'll go on other websites, they'll say, hey, I just hacked into the University of this or that, and they'll brag about it. If you ever hear about those things, make sure to report it. And excessive complaints about identity theft from students. This is becoming more and more real. You have students come into the financial aid office, say, hey, I just found out somebody opened a credit card in my name. Somebody opened a bank account in my name. Those are things that when you have one or two, maybe that's just happenstance, but when it gets to 5 to 10, when you have 20 students come into the financial aid office saying somebody opened credit cards in my name, somebody assumed my identity, then there may definitely be an issue. The one thing I also want to talk about that's not on the slides is a Dear Colleague letter that was sent out in July of 2016 about protecting student information. It came from federal student aid. Under all of your higher education program participation agreements, everybody agrees that they will protect student financial aid information. It's not only in the PPA, it's also legally protected under Graham-Leach-Bliley. How many people know Graham-Leach-Bliley? Yep. So it is very, very important. Again, this is something that a few years ago we didn't talk about a lot. We wouldn't think, how could our computers be targets? Now more and more, this is becoming more and more important. We're getting involved in more and more investigations that involve the disclosure, the breaches, and the exfiltration, the movement of hundreds of thousands of students' personally identifiable information overseas. So it's really important that, again, to reiterate what Aaron said, you guys are the front lines. You are the eyes and ears. So when you see something that doesn't make sense, please report it. And then the next section, we're going to talk about pathways to success, how we can continue to work together to kind of meet some of these threats that we're facing.
I think one of the things that we're always hesitant to talk about is what we call the insider threat. How many of you are familiar with that term, right? We often think about that in our line of work, because in many cases that we ultimately end up prosecuting, we find that many of you actually had information, saw things that didn't quite sit right with you, suspected, looking at your colleagues, something's just not right, I can't put my hand on it. So that term, see something, say something, what we're asking is that you just be mindful of those things, have situational awareness, and if nothing else, not to go out and buy cuffs and cuff your colleague, but to pick up the phone and call our agents. We have 2 agents here from the Southeast region, Corey and Trish, to call us and talk through it with us. But the insider threat is very real, because a lot of that information where people have financial troubles, they're having marital problems, there's just a number of reasons why good people do bad things. I mean, how many times have you looked up and you said, wow, I can't believe Aaron did such? It happens. Doesn't make Aaron a bad guy. Unfortunately, he was put in a situation where he made a bad decision. So keep in mind, the insider threat is very real. Yes, you are a target, but oftentimes you see things occurring within your offices that you probably should just pick up the phone and have a conversation about.
The other reason why you would want to do that is you don't want to get caught up in, there is a statute, misprison of a felony, Title 18, USC 4, misprison of a felony, misprison. And basically, it's if you're aware of a fraud and you don't report it, you can be prosecuted for not reporting it. So it's very important to report to the OIG. So why report to the OIG? It's a statutory and regulatory requirement, like we talked about earlier in the regulation. It's your ethical responsibility to deter others from committing fraud and abuse, to continue to protect the integrity of our programs, and to avoid being part of a fraud scheme. You don't want to get caught up on that, right? Prevent administrative action, termination, suspension, like we talked about, and avoid civil penalties and criminal prosecution, to prevent criminal prosecution. So we do have a hotline, 1-800-MISUSED, and we wanted to talk to you a little bit about our hotline. Many of the complaints that we get will be referred to our regions to be worked as investigations or inquiries, but not all the complaints that are filed with the OIG will generate an investigation, audit, or inspection by the OIG. We may refer matters to other education offices within our department. We may refer matters outside of education to other law enforcement entities. We may refer matters back to you to handle administratively. But as long as you refer those matters to us, you've done your due diligence. But don't be surprised if you receive it back from us saying, please handle this matter administratively. We may ask you to report back, or we may not. And the OIG hotline does not provide updates regarding the status of complaints.
And so that's often a question we get where there are referrals made. The privacy laws prohibit us from sharing information, in particular when it involves a third party. So there's some frustration where, yes, we can tell you we haven't opened the matter, or yes, we've opened the matter, and many of you will say, give me the details, right? I would, give me the details. But we're not sharing that with you because we just decided not to, but there are laws that prohibit us from doing that. And so where we can, I will commit, we will share what we can with you to help you and help our office perform its function. But in those cases where we can't, just understand there are laws that really prohibit us from doing so.
So how you can help the OIG, how you can help us continue to prevent fraud. As we heard earlier, and you've heard throughout the presentation, you're already doing that, so thank you. Many of you are stopping funds from going out. You're putting students in overpayments, questioning documents, so you're already doing that. But continue to do that, right? Continue to come to training like you are here today. Internal controls training. Each year, agents are required in our office to take internal controls training and other types of training. So ensure that your staff is receiving the necessary Title IV training. Reviewing documents thoroughly. I remember as an agent, for me, it was a street agent, looking at the documents and comparing admissions, registrars, and financial aid office, comparing the different documents, because that's where you always found a mistake. You know, if a student was claiming to be, you know, a graduate of a school or not a graduate of a school, there's always somewhere where you'll find conflicting information. So comparing those documents, the authenticity of documents. Like I mentioned earlier, those GEDs with the same serial number, the copy and paste, and things like that. So reviewing documents thoroughly, questioning documents, like I said, and verifying the authenticity. Requesting additional information from students. If you have a question, it's probably, you know, it could be an indication of a bigger problem. So requesting documentation and reviewing the information on those different documents. And of course, contacting the OIG if you suspect fraud, and cooperating with the OIG in connection with an audit or an investigation. That's how you can continue to help us in achieving our mission. You know, each day you're shining the light on fraudsters, and you know, like I said, we're going to be taking confessions afterwards. We're going to take a corner. So if you have, but we are going to be here for a few minutes after the session. If you have any questions, if you don't want to ask the question in front of everyone, or if you need assistance with anything. I mean, part of this is so you can put a face, friendly face to the OIG. Know that you could contact us with any questions. Sometimes we'll go out to bigger school systems and during financial aid associations to do training sessions. So those are, that's something that we can do on our website. You'll be able to have the contact list of all the managers in the different offices, as you saw earlier. So feel free to call. This is our hotline, but again, that pretty much is the end of our presentation. So again, thank you for continuing to shine the light on fraud, and we thank you for coming today.
So this is where I get to bribe you, right? For those, I think I have 5, and we have another token here for questions. So I'm going to give tokens to the first 5 people to ask questions. And she's already sprinted to the mic. Yeah. So I'm going to honor her question first.
I just have a quick question. We deal a lot with the red flag students where we we get that gut feeling there's something wrong. There's multiple triggers. We look at demographics for our distance learning students. How far can we go to stop aid from dispersing?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. There are pamphlets when you're exiting to the right and left. Please grab a pamphlet, take some to your staff, which will have the information about the hotline. So please grab a pamphlet as you exit. And we also have business cards here. Sorry about that.
We've kind of gotten to the point where we put identity statements out there, but once they meet,
I'm gonna step away from that. Go ahead.
We got the mic over here. That's fine.
Yeah.
Keep on going.
I just wanted to know how far can we go? We try and postpone it. We check enrollment. How far is it before it becomes more of an abusive type situation?
Well, that's somewhat challenging to answer in that we'd have to understand sort of what facts you have. When you see, I would always tell you be careful of when you see one or two indicators, great, because sometimes you can get false positives.
Right.
But in those situations, that's where we ask you to pick up the phone and come and have a conversation so we can understand the facts that you have. And sometimes those conversations can occur with some of the program folks that are well-versed with your processes and procedures. And so we would encourage you at that point just to pick up the phone and have a conversation with us.
Yeah, unfortunately, a couple of them I've been advised to go ahead and let it disperse, and then it's return to Title IV, and then we report it. And
Correct, and we're so always chasing our tails on that, yeah. Don't go anywhere.
I think that's all.
Hi, I'm Diane and I work at a four-year state university. We just started our first online master's program, Masters of Information Technology. What are some things we should be looking at to make sure we don't have any straw students, things suspicious?
Is this not working anymore?
No.
The report I mentioned earlier, it's the investigative program advisory report, distance education fraud rings. I'm going to save a copy for you. I only made 20 copies, but it's online. If you Google that, Dear Colleague letter, which now ran out, 11-17, that Dear Colleague letter talks about fraud in education, in distance education fraud rings, and it'll have a direct link to this report that I'm going to give you. But like I mentioned earlier, sometimes they'll use the same email address, the same IP address. You'll have a fraud ring leader signing on from their home to complete the work for the straw students. Sometimes the other students may not be aware they're true victims or they're participating in the fraud scheme. So those are some of the red flags, but this report will have very specific examples, and this report was generated from our work. So it'll have examples from our cases. And Rob, you may have.
So it's a little different with the distance. Some of the other things that we've looked at is when the funds go on an ATM card in order to do the disbursements, and we'll see all of the disbursements coming from the same ATM machine or all around the same area when they're not supposed to be living in that area. So those are kind of the things to look for. Shared email addresses, shared addresses, those kind of things. And the report does talk to those specific things.
Similar high school diplomas, because the fraud ring leader is, sometimes they get lazy, so they'll have the same high school diplomas and just changing names, things like that. So those documents are real important. The thorough review, the comparing of the different documents. People will call, pretend to be, male, female, like me calling, pretending to be a male. We made recordings of people pretending to be, a different gender. So all those things But if you have any specific questions, always feel free to call us, and we can offer some more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You said something that concerned me, and it had to do with me going to prison.
We'll be gentle. No.
We're all familiar with 34 CFR 668, administrative capability. Our institutions have a responsibility to report, but you mentioned something about a personal responsibility, and my concern is that we have a process at our school where we send our concerns up to a university attorney, and he or she may or, and not my school, no. May or may not choose to push it along to you, and at what point does this become my problem?
And I think that's a great question, and I think there are a lot of folks that face situations such as that. Great question. I want to make you aware of what there's a whistleblower provision. So there are many of you trying to do the right things, and rightfully so. You're afraid if you overstep, you go against maybe the grain, it could cost you your job. That's a very real fear. But I will tell you, there are provisions in the law to protect you, that you make an appropriate referral, you inform your administration, and no action is taken, you can refer that to our office, and you will get protections, you will get confidentiality on what you've referred to us, so that we can in fact look into it and see whether that not is merit. So that's a great question. I wish it's one we thought to cover, but as we're talking to you and saying, hey, come to us and talk to us about what you're seeing, that personal consideration for all of us is what you factor in first. You don't want your livelihood, your families, but there are protections for you, and whistleblower protections. You can look it up online. You can go to our website. There's a form there as well. But if you make a referral for action, your administration, your officials, school officials, don't take any action, there's a path forward. Thanks.
Yes, you spoke about the management information report, and you said that was from 2011?
The IPAR on
Yes.
distance education, yes.
And then I think also you had spoke on you're not allowed to disclose the investigation findings that you were, looking through different cases. And I wanted to ask, being that obviously criminals are generally 10 steps forward, is there a way that you can post redacted information on your website so that we can look and see the current day-to-day trends, so that we're, at least two steps behind, not 20?
Terrific question. So a redaction wouldn't do.
But at least it'll be the trend.
I got you. So the trifolds we've put back there will tell you the different things that are happening. The problem with a redaction, if we put it up there, have to report, you're not going to understand what it says, right, for privacy reasons. So I think that's a great idea. I think it's something we probably can consider. But to your point, one of the reasons we go out and we do fraud awareness briefings and we do outreach is sort of to keep you up to date on the trends and the things we're seeing. You can request, you can call our office, and you can request a fraud briefing, so we can come out and talk about the cases we're seeing. There's a FOIA process, not that my general counsel would like this, but there is a FOIA process. If there's certain kinds of cases you're interested in, probably will be heavily redacted, so don't get mad at me if you can't understand half the report, but that will give you some trends. But we're happy to come out and talk about cases that you saw posted here that are public record, that we've successfully prosecuted. We can come out and talk about those cases all day long. Thanks.
Hi. My questions might be a little bit more specific. My name is Denise. I oversee the direct loan program. I'm going through a situation right now where I have a student whose father applied for the PLUS, then sent a note after he didn't get a refund, like he wanted like $60,000, and we were like, no, we can't process that much money anyway. So then he canceled it and said that somebody took the loan out in his name he didn't know. Then her stepfather is trying to apply for the thing, but when I look at the data from the different master promissory notes and cosigner and stuff, there's a lot of overlapping information. And I'm like, hey, I'm not comfortable processing this at all. What do you do in a situation like that? We reached out to COD and we haven't gotten a response back on whether, I'm not comfortable processing it, but I have a colleague who is inclined to process. And I'm like, I just want some clarification. Yeah. And remember, the regs call for conflicting information. If you have conflicting information, which it sounds like you've done your due diligence and you do, the regs call for you not to disperse the funds. And I have here attorneys from Federal Student Aid that can answer more questions about that. But any questions about that? She can help you with that. Sorry, Denise, I'm making you work. Yes, ma'am.
I've had, since unusual employment history came out as something we have to look into, the FAFSA may trigger saying the student is going to multiple schools, getting federal aid, etc. So when we've then had to ask for documentation from the students, I've had several in the last 2 years say to me, I didn't go to those schools, that wasn't me, I didn't get those loans, I didn't get that Pell. Being in financial aid for 35 years, tend to be a little skeptical at times that I'm being told the truth. And I have used you as the daddy will get you when he gets home tonight person for years. I have been saying to them, that means someone has stolen I take them seriously, I look them right in the eye and I say, someone has stolen your identity. Oh my goodness, we must notify these people immediately. They'll be talking to you, they'll be getting information from you. Now, they've backed off, every one of them. My question is, should I have still reported that to you, even though, so now I'm in trouble?
No. We'll be gentle. No.
You would want to know that these people are doing this. Okay. Well, yeah, I've been using this for years. When I tell them that I'm going to call them, oh my goodness, I'm going to hand the phone to you, and they're like.
Aaron, can I add one thing on that? On our website, there are reporting, there's a procedure to follow if you think you have a potential fraud ring. And something like that is where my team would come in. We can look at the applications to see where they're coming from, and we can see if those same commonalities are found from, like Aaron was saying, going to other schools. Okay. So you may have a small piece of the puzzle, but we may have a larger piece, and your information may bring everything together. So it's really important to report that because that's something we can look into.
Okay,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great questions.
Hi, I'm Joan Zanders from Northern Virginia Community College, and we have a very close working relationship with the OIG. First name basis, we're seeing a lot of various prospects. But what we're seeing, what you had mentioned about same email addresses, same addresses, that's long gone. What we're seeing now is masked email addresses, masked IP addresses, very sophisticated behind-the-scenes individuals working. I think if you were just running an email address, you may not find that anymore.
They can't hide from Rob, though.
We're even seeing...
Believe me, they can't hide from Rob.
We're even seeing robo-applications for admission, where it's all being done in an automated system.
Yeah, and here's where we balance with things. When we put out something like the IPAR, we're pretty much telling the criminals what we're looking for.
Right.
So when we say, hey, look for IP addresses, look for common email addresses, they just say we're going to stop using those things. Especially with IP addresses, if you Google how to mask your IP address, there's 55 free ways of doing it that it does not take a technical person to figure out how to do that. So again, that's why when you start seeing things, we may not know about it, and it's important. We have a model, a data model that's used to look for fraud. And those are things that we can input into our data model to pick up on those new type of ways that they're taking advantage of the system.
Yeah, it's that staying a step ahead, and you
Yep.
don't usually know what that step is until
Yep.
it's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
We are.
I'm Ben Carmichael. I'm with Winston-Salem State in North Carolina. I have a question. Where is the line between an honest mistake and attempting to defraud the government? I had a student who did not report his father as his parents is married, so his mother was single. And it turns out he has a rather high income, and he also works for the Fed here in Atlanta, so he's a federal employee. When I confronted them that for 3 years now they've been putting only the grandmother's information on the FAFSA. They didn't even include the mother. So we corrected it all.
Just see us afterwards, okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's...
I mean, that sounds like a good case.
I'm sorry.
Zero tolerance. Zero tolerance for public corruption. That is our highest priority.
As I say, I'm Ben Carmichael, and I don't work for any college. So I don't know if it's an honest mistake or not. So I can email you. Yeah. They coughed it up quick when right. Right. Right.
Let us do the job, yeah.
Okay, I'll probably email you because he even tried to say it was his stepfather, and they have it's not.
Yeah.
That sounds perfectly. I'll shoot you an email. So.
I mean, that's another way is when the lies lead to lies, and then it's beyond an honest mistake.
And that's what we do. We gather all these documents, the evidence, and that picture will start becoming clear. That's the beauty of our job.
All right, I think we have time for one or two more. We're getting the sign that we're going to be wrapped up.
Just real quickly to the prior person, I'm not sure how many people don't remember their fathers. Usually fathers are pretty memorable in our lives, but I guess it's an honest mistake if you forget you have a dad. I have a question. It sounds like a lot of this is almost like trying to put the horse back in the barn after the barn doors are open. We're trying to track down fraud for financial aid. Well, all these people had to have filed a FAFSA. So at what point does the department work with you all to see some of this on the FAFSA submission side? I mean, it's got to be a lot of the IT side of it because it's all coming in through computers for the most part now. So how many of these are stopped at that point and don't even get out to the school? Because obviously I think schools are somewhat limited in their ability to really track all this down.
So I'm going to say it's a question for FSA to answer, but I will tell you we work very closely with FSA to build in indicators and flags. So I can't say to what percentage, but I know FSA has done a terrific job building in
because I'm thinking in terms of the same IP address, and I understand that's now old hat, but how that wasn't flagged at the FAFSA submission seems strange to me, that there should be something, some program looking that, wait a minute, we just got 100 FAFSAs from the same IP address. Thank you.
We have, along those lines of being proactive, there's on our website, there's a management information report of a proactive analytics that we did of the PAS system, looking at those things that you just talked about. So.
Hi, my name's Heather, and I'm from an unnamed college in Massachusetts.
We'll find you, don't
There
worry.
you go. No, we actually have a good relationship with the OIG, so that's good. One of the things that we are starting to notice is an increase in what I would call IRS fraud. A lot of families who are filing as head of household, but they've been married for 10 years, and people saying that they're single, but they're really married, and a tax preparer, and it's a tax preparer and a tax agency, too, in specific in our region. And so, like my director kind of said, well, you know, what do we do with this? And so my question to you is, do we call you guys or the IRS?
Call us both. Yeah.
Okay.
And we have prosecuted tax preparers that were preparing financial aid documents for students. And actually, we did a search warrant, and they had 2 sets of tax returns. For school file, not for school file. So we have worked cases like that. So thank you. The last question, you get a gift, a parting gift. Thank you all.
Thank you all for your time.
Let us know if we can ever be of assistance.